I never thought a train platform could become a courtroom without walls. That night at Atlantic Terminal, the air smelled of metal, oil, and impatience. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, making everyone look pale and tired. I was 8 months pregnant, my back aching, my arms numb from holding Lucas, my 5-month-old son, against my chest. His breath was warm on my collarbone. I kept whispering that everything would be okay, though I wasn't sure I believed it myself. Victor had texted me 20 minutes earlier. Just one line. "Come sign the papers. This ends tonight. No apology. No concern for the child I was carrying. No question about Lucas." I came because I was scared of what would happen if I didn't. When a man like Victor Langford says something ends, he usually means you. People rushed past us, briefcases swinging, earbuds in, eyes fixed on their phones. I stood near the yellow safety line, rocking Lucas gently. My phone buzzed again, but before I could read it, someone slammed into my shoulder. Hard. Too hard to be an accident. My balance shifted. My foot slid on the concrete. In that instant, time broke. Lucas slipped from my arms, not falling, not flying, just leaving me. I screamed his name, a sound that didn't feel human. The roar of an approaching train thundered through the tunnel, shaking the platform under my feet. Someone shouted. Someone else froze. No one moved fast enough. Then a voice cut through everything. Clear, commanding, "Emergency stop, now!" Red lights flashed. The train screamed back in protest, metal grinding against metal. A pair of strong arms reached for Lucas before he touched the ground. I collapsed, my knees slamming the platform, my hands clawing the air. I looked up and saw the man holding my son. He wore a rail operations jacket, his jaw tight, his eyes locked on Lucas like he was guarding his own heart. For a second, our eyes met, and something strange passed between us. Recognition, shock, fear, like looking into a mirror that had been missing my whole life. Security swarmed the platform. Someone pulled me away. Lucas cried, alive, furious, perfect. The man handed him to a medic, then turned back to the tracks, already being shouted at by supervisors. I heard someone say protocol violation. I heard another say suspension. As they led me toward the exit, my phone finally vibrated again. Victor's message appeared on the cracked screen. "I hope you learned your lesson." I didn't know it yet, but the man who saved my son was my brother. And the train Victor tried to use to erase me had just started something he could never stop. Behind us, cameras blinked, strangers whispered, and the platform returned to motion. I held my stomach, feeling the baby kick, a warning and a promise at once. Whatever Victor planned next, my children had already survived his first attempt. And that knowledge changed everything I thought I knew forever onward. The hospital room was too quiet for a place where lives almost ended. Machines hummed softly, lights dimmed to a tired yellow, and the smell of antiseptic clung to my skin. Lucas slept in a clear plastic bassinet beside my bed, his tiny chest rising and falling like nothing in the world had nearly taken him away. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the edge of the platform again. A nurse named Valerie checked my blood pressure and frowned. She asked gentle questions, the kind trained to sound harmless. Was I feeling dizzy? Had I been under stress lately? Did I feel safe at home? I nodded when I should have answered, because telling the truth felt heavier than lying. Stress didn't begin to describe my life. Fear lived in my bones. Victor arrived an hour later, not running, not worried. He wore a charcoal coat that probably cost more than my rent, his hair perfect, his face calm. He looked around the room like a man inspecting damage to property. When his eyes landed on Lucas, there was no softness, only calculation. "You caused a scene," he said quietly, leaning close enough that the nurse couldn't hear. "There are cameras everywhere." I whispered back, "Our son almost died." Victor exhaled slowly, annoyed. "Lower your voice. People already think you're unstable." That word landed harder than the fall. Unstable. He handed me a folder, thick and heavy. Legal papers. Medical consent forms. A temporary custody agreement. I hadn't even known such things could exist so quickly. He told me his lawyers were being proactive. He said it like a kindness. I asked where Celeste was. His mouth tightened for half a second. "She's handling the press," he said, "which is more than I can say for you." Outside the door, raised voices echoed down the hall. I recognized the rail supervisor's uniform through the glass. The man from the platform stood there, shoulders squared as two officials spoke sharply at him. He didn't argue. He just listened, jaw clenched, eyes forward, like punishment was familiar territory. Something twisted in my chest. He had saved my child, and they were treating him like a problem. A social worker entered next, clipboard pressed to her chest. She introduced herself and explained there had been a report filed due to maternal distress in a public transit environment. Victor nodded along, sympathetic, concerned. He squeezed my hand when she looked at him. I wanted to scream. They asked me to recount what happened. Victor interrupted twice, corrected my wording, softened details. By the end, my own memory felt slippery, unreliable. The social worker wrote carefully, then said they would follow up. After they left, Victor bent down, his voice dropping to ice. "You will sign the papers," he said. "If you don't, next time they won't ask questions first." He walked out without looking back. I stared at Lucas, memorizing his face like it might be taken from me. Outside, the man from the platform was finally escorted away, badge removed, head still high. Our eyes met through the glass again. I felt the walls closing in, paperwork replacing compassion, authority replacing truth. Every signature threatened to erase me as a mother. Every silence worked in Victor's favor. I realized then that survival would not depend on love or fairness, but on evidence, patience, and someone brave enough to stand beside me through what followed. This time, I knew one thing for certain. The accident wasn't over. It was only changing shape into something far more dangerous. By morning, the story had already decided who I was. I learned that before I even left the hospital. My phone buzzed nonstop with messages I didn't recognize, links sent by strangers, screenshots from accounts I'd never followed. A short video was everywhere. It showed me stumbling near the platform edge, Lucas slipping, my scream cut short. It did not show the shove. It did not show the hands that caused it. It did not show the emergency stop. The caption read, "Unstable mother causes transit scare." I watched it once, then again, my stomach turning harder each time. The comments were worse. People called me careless, dramatic, unfit. Some said my children deserved better. Others asked why someone like me was allowed to reproduce. I closed the app, but the words stayed, crawling under my skin. Victor knew before I did. He arrived with coffee for the nurses and sympathy for the staff, playing the part of the concerned husband. He told them he was worried about my mental state after childbirth stress. He used calm words, professional words, the kind that sound reasonable until they trap you. A hospital administrator came by with forms. A media liaison followed. They advised me not to speak publicly for my own protection. Victor nodded for me. I realized then that silence had become another cage. Later that afternoon, a woman knocked softly and stepped into my room. She introduced herself as Dana Reed from Child Services. Her tone was polite, her questions precise. Did I have stable housing? Did I have help? Had there been previous incidents? Victor sat beside me, answering before I could, painting a picture where he was the safety net and I was the risk. When Dana left, I finally broke. My hands shook so badly I couldn't hold Lucas. Tears fell onto the blanket, hot and useless. I thought of signing everything just to make it stop. That was when I saw him again. Through the narrow window in the door, the rail supervisor stood alone in the hallway, speaking quietly into his phone. His badge was gone. His shoulders looked heavier than before. When he hung up, he leaned his forehead against the wall, just for a second, like a man reminding himself to breathe. I didn't know his name, but I knew something else. He hadn't been looking at cameras or lawyers when he saved my son. He'd been looking at Lucas. Victor noticed my gaze. His eyes followed mine, then hardened. "Don't romanticize heroes," he said. He broke protocol. People like that don't last. That night, after Victor left, a nurse slipped a folded note onto my tray with my medication. No name, just a time and a place written in careful block letters and one sentence underneath. He didn't fall by accident. My heart began to pound so loudly I was sure someone could hear it. I hid the note under Lucas's blanket and stared at the ceiling until dawn, replaying every second on that platform, every face, every movement. Someone out there knew the truth. Someone had seen more than the edited video allowed. And if Victor was already tightening the net around me, then whatever that truth was, it scared him enough to start erasing me in public. I held my son closer as the sun rose, understanding too late that the internet verdict was only the beginning. The real danger wasn't being hated by strangers. It was being silenced by the man who knew exactly how to make lies look like facts and was just getting started. I left the hospital 2 days later with a plastic bag of paperwork and a knot in my chest that refused to loosen. Victor had arranged everything, or so he claimed. A car waited outside. A driver opened the door. I didn't get in. I tightened my grip on Lucas and asked to be taken home instead. Brooklyn greeted us with gray skies and sirens. The basement apartment smelled like damp concrete and old cooking oil. It was small, but it was mine, at least for now. I set Lucas down and finally let myself cry, quietly, so the neighbors wouldn't hear. Every wall felt thin. Every sound felt watched. That evening, a knock came at the door. I froze. No one announced themselves. Another knock followed, softer this time. When I opened it, a woman stood there with a calm smile and a leather folder tucked under her arm. She introduced herself as Celeste Rowan. She said she worked in reputation management. She said Victor was worried about me. She said she wanted to help. Celeste spoke gently, choosing words like stepping stones. She told me the video was spreading fast, but it could be contained. She said narratives mattered more than facts online. If I cooperated, she could shift public sympathy, make me look overwhelmed instead of reckless. All she needed was my trust. I asked what cooperation meant. She said interviews, statements, silence at the right moments. She said Victor would fund therapy, housing, medical care. She said my children deserve stability. Her voice was warm, too warm. I noticed her phone on the table, screen down, recording light hidden. I noticed how carefully she avoided words like accident or shove. When I mentioned the man who hit me, her eyes flickered, just once. You don't want to build your future on anger, she said. Men like Victor don't lose. After she left, I locked the door and slid to the floor, my back against the wood. My hands shook again. Something about her visit felt rehearsed, like she had been sent to measure me, not save me. An hour later, my phone buzzed with a new message from an unknown number. One line. She's lying to you. Another message followed. Meet me tomorrow, noon, diner on Atlantic Avenue. I stared at the screen, my heart racing. It could be a trap. It could be nothing, but doing nothing was already killing me. That night, I barely slept. Lucas stirred, the baby inside me kicked, and my mind ran in circles. Victor had lawyers. Celeste had narratives. I had bruises fading on my arm, and a memory no one wanted. By morning, I understood something clearly. Help was not going to look safe. It was going to look risky, imperfect, and easy to doubt. And if I wanted to protect my children, I would have to walk toward uncertainty instead of away from it. I packed slowly, choosing diapers, documents, and a spare shirt, each item a decision. The mirror showed a woman I barely recognized, eyes bruised by fear but still awake. I told myself strength was not loud, that survival could be quiet and stubborn. Outside, footsteps passed my door, and I waited until silence returned before moving. I checked the lock twice, breathed deep, and reminded myself that fear did not own me anymore at that moment. As I locked the apartment behind me, diaper bag on my shoulder, I felt the ground shift beneath my feet again. This time, I was stepping forward on purpose into a truth someone was desperate to bury. The diner smelled like burnt coffee and old grease, the kind of place where time stalled. I chose a booth near the window, Lucas strapped to my chest, my back to the wall. Noon traffic crawled outside. Every time the door chimed, my pulse jumped. A man slid into the booth across from me without asking. He wore a plain jacket, dark hair cut short, eyes alert but tired. He set his phone face down and pushed a folded receipt toward me. On it were 2 times, a platform number, and a note, camera gap. I'm Ethan, he said. I work rail operations. I told him I didn't know anything about trains. He nodded. You don't need to. I know about systems. And about what shouldn't happen. He described the platform in exact measures, where people stand, where sightlines break. He said someone had positioned a body to create panic and pull attention, then timed a shove when the train noise peaked. It wasn't reckless. It was designed. My hands went cold. Who would do that? Ethan didn't answer. He asked about Victor, about Celeste, about the folder of papers. When I hesitated, he waited, patient as steel. I told him everything. He took a breath like he'd been holding it for years. "Hannah," he said carefully, "this is the part you won't believe." He reached into his wallet and slid out a creased photograph. A woman smiled at the camera, younger, tired, familiar. "My mother. My mother," I whispered. "Our mother," he corrected. The world tilted. He explained in pieces, different fathers, protective services, files sealed. He'd searched quietly, afraid of reopening wounds. Then he saw me on the platform, heard my voice. Recognition hit like a switch. "I pulled the stop, knowing I'd be punished," he said. "I did it anyway." I asked what he wanted. He shook his head. "Nothing from you. But I need your permission to do what comes next." He said the rail authority was under federal review. He had logs, timestamps, maintenance anomalies tied to Victor's properties, not proof of a crime, but a pattern. With my account, it became motive. Fear surged. "If we do this, he'll come after my kids." Ethan leaned forward. "That's why we move slow. Evidence first. Silence when it helps, noise when it counts." Outside, a siren wailed, then faded. I looked at Lucas, his fingers curled in sleep, and felt the baby shift inside me. I thought of Celeste's smile and Victor's calm threats. I nodded. "Tell me what to do." Ethan slid a second receipt across the table with a list of steps. He stood, pausing. "One more thing. Trust will be tested." As he left, my phone buzzed with a message from Celeste. "We should talk tonight. Urgent." I folded the receipts into my bag. The game had started, and for the first time, I wasn't alone with blood tying us to the truth. I paid the check and stepped into daylight, counting breaths. The city felt sharper, louder, unforgiving. Every reflection looked like an eye. I took a longer route home, ducking into a pharmacy, then a crowded bus, practicing being invisible. At my door, I listened before unlocking. Inside, I wrote everything down, times, names, sensations, hiding the pages inside diapers. I backed up my phone and turned off locations. Tonight, I would meet Celeste, smiling, careful. Tomorrow, I would become harder to erase. I knew the risk was real, but fear had already cost me enough, and protecting my children mattered more than consequences for now and forever onward. Celeste chose a quiet wine bar near the river, the kind with low music and shadows that softened faces. She waved when she saw me, already seated, already in control. I noticed her phone placed carefully beside her glass, screen dark, angle perfect. She asked about the baby, about my health, about stress, each question wrapped in concern. I answered lightly, the way she wanted, pretending I hadn't learned to hear traps inside kindness. She told me Victor was under pressure, investors nervous, boards impatient. She said accidents frightened people who liked order. Then she leaned in and lowered her voice. "He needs you cooperative," she said, "and I need you safe." I asked what safe meant. She smiled. Quiet. Celeste slid a document across the table. A revised agreement, more money, a private apartment, therapy sessions. In exchange, I would acknowledge negligence, accept supervised visitation, and release Victor from liability. She framed it as mercy. I imagined signing and watching my children grow up through glass. I imagined Lucas asking why I never fought. My stomach tightened. "I need time," I said. Celeste nodded, unsurprised. "Of course, but understand something. Victor believes problems end when they're contained. If they don't, he escalates." Her phone vibrated. She glanced at it, then stood. "Think wisely." I walked home slowly, counting steps, replaying every word. At my door, an envelope waited. No stamp. Inside was a copy of a report labeled Preliminary Safety Review, with notes circled in red. Ethan's handwriting. A message followed, "She's bait. Don't bite." The next morning, my bank card declined. Rent overdue, utilities pending. Victor had tightened the screws. I called legal aid, waited on hold, fed Lucas, breathed through cramps as the baby pressed low. Fear came in waves, but so did resolve. Ethan called that afternoon. He said the review had reached federal desks. Quiet ones. He warned me Victor would try to discredit me next. "Expect a strike," he said. It came before sunset. Child Services knocked. A different worker this time, firmer. She cited concerns about housing stability and online behavior. She asked to see the apartment. She looked at the crib, the bottles, the paperwork. She was polite, but her eyes measured risk. After she left, I sat on the floor shaking. The baby kicked hard, a reminder to stay upright. I opened my notebook and wrote everything again, steadying my hands. That night, Celeste texted, "Last chance." I replied, "Yes." I knew agreeing didn't mean surrender. It meant proximity. It meant listening longer than comfort allowed. It meant letting enemies think they were winning. As I turned off the lights, I placed my phone face down and whispered a promise to my children. I would endure their lies, collect their mistakes, and wait for the moment truth outweighed fear, because it always does when patience becomes power. I did not sleep much. The city hummed above me, pipes knocking, trains passing like distant warnings. I checked the locks twice, then 3 times, memorizing the sound of safety. In the dark, I practiced my calm voice, the one liars underestimate. Tomorrow I would smile again, nod again, and pretend I was cornered. Victor believed pressure created obedience. Celeste believed stories erased facts. They were wrong. Pressure also reveals fractures, and stories collapse when weighed down by dates, numbers, and witnesses. I was done reacting. From this night on, every move would be measured, documented, and intentional, because survival was no longer enough. I was preparing to expose them both. The end was coming, and they would not see it until too late. The next 3 days blurred into one long test of control. I agreed to meet Celeste again, this time in a glass office overlooking the river, where everything echoed and nothing felt private. She praised my maturity and spoke about timelines, mediation, and optics. I listened, nodded, and asked careful questions, letting her believe fear had softened me. Each night, I documented everything: times, phrases, threats wrapped in politeness. Ethan taught me how to preserve metadata, how to back up messages so they couldn't be altered. He warned me never to forward originals. Evidence had rules, and rules were protection. Victor struck next. A legal notice arrived claiming I had violated the NDA by speaking to unauthorized parties. He demanded immediate compliance and sole medical decision authority for both children. Reading it felt like swallowing glass. Still, I did not respond. Instead, I went to my prenatal appointment. The doctor's voice tightened when she read my blood pressure. Bed rest was recommended. Stress was no longer just emotional, it was measurable. I signed forms with shaking hands and went home carrying fear like a second spine. That afternoon, an email surfaced from an anonymous account. Attached was a transit maintenance schedule with alterations highlighted. Ethan called minutes later. "This ties Victor's subsidiary to deferred safety updates," he said. "Not illegal alone. Dangerous in context. We needed corroboration. It came from an unexpected place." A junior analyst from Victor's firm requested a confidential meeting, terrified, conscience cracking under weight. He brought invoices, coded descriptions, and a payment labeled consulting, routed through Celeste's network. The room went quiet as the pattern locked into place. I felt sick, not surprised. Sick because the truth had fingerprints. Celeste called that night, cheerful. She said Victor was pleased with my cooperation. She suggested a joint statement soon. I agreed and asked for a draft. When it arrived, I read every line, noting omissions like wounds. Ethan told me to breathe. "We're close," he said, "but close is dangerous." The next morning, Child Services returned, this time with a supervisor. They cited escalating concerns and scheduled a hearing. I held Lucas while answering, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. After they left, I locked the door and cried without sound. Then I did something new. I recorded my own statement, factual and calm, outlining events in order. I didn't publish it, I stored it. By evening, Victor texted one sentence: "You don't know when to stop." I looked at my children and finally understood leverage. He needed silence. We needed daylight. I sent Ethan the last file and pressed save. Tomorrow, the truth would begin moving without me asking permission, and once it did, no amount of money could slow it down. It would travel through offices, servers, and minds, carried by people who preferred facts to favors. I turned off my phone, laid beside my children, and accepted the quiet before impact. Outside, the city kept breathing, unaware that a private war had shifted. Victor believed control meant endings. He was wrong. Control only delays consequences. What was coming had momentum now, built from patience, records, and survival. And when it surfaced, it would not ask who was powerful. It would only ask what was true, and that answer would finally speak for us. I sat there listening to their breathing, knowing the hardest part was no longer fear, but waiting, because justice moves slowly, yet once awake, it does not sleep again. The countdown had begun, and every step forward pulled them closer to their own reckoning at last. The hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning, early enough that the city still felt undecided about waking up. I arrived carrying Lucas, paperwork organized, nerves wrapped tight. Victor was already there, flanked by attorneys, calm as ever. Celeste sat 2 rows back, unreadable. The supervisor opened with concerns about safety, stability, and public perception. I answered simply, dates, facts, no emotion. Victor's lawyer painted me as overwhelmed, reactive, unreliable. I listened, hands steady, heart pounding. Then Ethan entered. He did not rush. He introduced himself formally, credentials clear, voice level. He explained rail protocols, deviations, and why the platform incident triggered an internal alarm. He did not accuse. He described patterns. The room shifted. Victor objected. The supervisor allowed testimony. Ethan submitted logs, timestamps, and third-party verification. He stated he had filed a protected disclosure weeks earlier. Whistleblower. The word hung heavy. Celeste's eyes finally moved. The supervisor paused proceedings. During the break, Victor cornered me. "You're destroying yourself," he hissed. "Walk away." I met his stare. I already did. When the hearing resumed, the tone had changed. Child Services recommended monitoring, not removal. The decision was temporary, but it was a crack. Outside, reporters waited. Cameras flashed. Victor smiled for them. I didn't. That night, the pressure doubled. Emails leaked. Blogs speculated. My name trended. Ethan warned me to stay quiet. Celeste texted congratulations, then demanded a meeting. I agreed. We met in her office after dark. She dropped the smile. She told me Victor was preparing a scorched earth defense. She offered protection. In exchange, she wanted immunity. She slid a flash drive across the desk. "Insurance," she said. I didn't touch it. I asked what was on it. "Everything," she replied, "but timing matters." I left without answering. At home, contractions tightened. Not labor yet, but close. I lay still, breathing, listening to Lucas sleep. Fear knocked. Resolve answered. I sent Ethan one message. "She has leverage." He replied quickly, "So do we." The next morning, federal investigators contacted Victor's firm. Subpoenas followed. Accounts froze. Partners panicked. The story shifted again. Celeste called repeatedly. I didn't answer. By evening, I felt the baby drop. The doctor told me to prepare. I packed a bag slowly, deliberately. Outside, sirens echoed like distant applause. As I locked the door, I understood the truth. I wasn't winning yet, but I was no longer losing. The machine built to erase me had turned inward, grinding on its own gears. And this time, I wasn't standing on the tracks. I thought about the platform again, the noise, the edge, the way strangers looked away. That memory no longer owned me. It informed me. I knew the road ahead would be brutal, public, and slow. Courts would argue. Articles would twist. Victor would pretend strength, but truth had begun its work. I would give birth soon, and with that pain would come proof that I endured. I was done apologizing for surviving. Whatever came next, I would meet it standing, with records in my hands and my children behind me, because the story was no longer about falling. It was about what rose afterward, quietly, relentlessly, and without permission. This chapter closed without applause, only resolve. I accepted that justice would not be kind or quick. Still, it would come. Each step mattered, each note mattered, each breath mattered. I was no longer invisible. I was documented, supported, and awake. And that awareness, once born, could never be pushed back into silence again. I carried that certainty forward, steady, unafraid, prepared for consequences, and ready to protect life fully. Labor started at 2:14 a.m., with a tightening that stole my breath and refused to let go. I timed contractions while Lucas slept beside me, his small hand curled around my finger like an anchor. When they reached 5 minutes apart, I called Ethan. He arrived without questions, helped me into the car, and drove through empty streets toward the hospital, where fear waited with paperwork. The delivery room lights were harsh. Nurses moved quickly. My body shook as pain stacked on pain, each wave louder than the last. Between contractions, I thought of the platform, the shove, the train screaming to stop. I told myself I had already survived worse. This was just another edge. Hours blurred. At sunrise, my daughter arrived, early but breathing, her cries sharp and alive. Relief broke through me so fast I sobbed. They placed her on my chest, warm and real. For a moment, nothing else existed. Then Victor appeared behind the glass. He wasn't allowed inside, but he didn't need to be. He watched, arms crossed, expression unreadable. An attorney stood beside him, already speaking to staff. Papers followed, claims, demands. He wanted to be listed as primary decision-maker. He wanted control before my stitches were finished. Ethan intervened calmly, citing the temporary order. Hospital security stepped in. Victor's jaw tightened. When he left, he smiled at me, slow and certain, like someone confident the system still bent his way. That afternoon, news broke online. Federal investigators had expanded their inquiry. A former contractor came forward. Victor's name trended again, this time with words like negligence and concealment. Celeste vanished from public view. I named my daughter Grace. The days that followed were quiet but heavy. I recovered in small increments. Child services visited, observed, documented. They noted stability, they noted support. Each note felt like a brick laid between us and danger. On the fourth day, Ethan brought coffee and an update. Victor's accounts were under review. His board requested explanations. Investors fled. The image he curated began to crack. That night, Victor sent one final message. "You think this is over?" I didn't reply. Instead, I held my children and slept. The reckoning had begun, not with shouting or revenge, but with consequences moving through channels he could not intimidate. I understood then that justice doesn't rush. It advances, steady and patient, until lies collapse under their own weight. Victor had built his life on control. Now control was slipping, and with every breath my daughter took, I felt certain of one thing. No matter what he tried next, he could never undo what was already set in motion, because truth, once born, survives. It moved through reports, hearings, budgets, and quiet resignations. People Victor trusted stopped returning calls. Doors that once opened closed without explanation. The power he relied on demanded obedience, and systems demanded proof. Proof accumulated. I watched from a hospital bed, learning that endurance can outlast intimidation. Grace slept against me. Lucas curled at my side, and Ethan stood guard without asking credit. I did not feel victorious. I felt grounded. Pain still existed, but it no longer ruled decisions. I understood that survival was only the first chapter. What followed was responsibility, honesty, and rebuilding a life that did not depend on fear. Outside the window, traffic flowed, ordinary and relentless. Inside, I promised my children that truth would be our inheritance, and that promise felt stronger than any threat ever sent. It was the beginning of accountability, healing, and a future shaped by courage rather than silence for us all together. The fallout arrived quietly, not with sirens but with envelopes, emails, and sudden silences. 2 weeks after Grace was born, Victor's name disappeared from the firm's website. His portrait vanished from the lobby wall. A press release followed, carefully worded, announcing his temporary leave pending investigation. Temporary was the word powerful men used when they hoped time would save them. Child Services closed their case the same morning. The supervisor shook my hand and said stability had been demonstrated. I nodded, too tired to smile, relief settling deep in my chest like warmth after a storm. For the first time in months, I slept without dreaming of trains. Ethan returned to work with full clearance and quiet respect. No ceremony, just a desk, a badge, and colleagues who now knew what integrity cost. He came by every evening, bringing groceries, fixing small things, reminding me that family could be steady instead of loud. The final hearing came 6 weeks later. Victor arrived thinner, eyes sharp with calculation. Celeste did not appear. Her evidence did. Recordings, transfers, timelines. The judge listened without expression. When the decision came, it was measured and final. Sole custody, mandatory support, a restraining order. Victor stared straight ahead, his face unreadable, his power reduced to ink on paper. Outside the courthouse, cameras waited. I walked past them without stopping, Grace asleep against my chest, Lucas holding my hand. I did not owe anyone my pain. Months passed, the investigation widened, contracts dissolved. Victor was charged, not dramatically, but thoroughly. Negligence, conspiracy, obstruction. His empire shrank into courtrooms and quiet rooms where no one applauded. One afternoon, I met Daniel, the investigator assigned to coordinate witness protection logistics. He was patient, kind, careful with his words. He treated my story like a responsibility, not a spectacle. Over time, conversations lingered, coffee followed. Trust grew slowly, honestly. A year later, we married in a small park ceremony. No headlines, just vows, children laughing, Ethan walking me forward. Daniel promised partnership, not rescue. I promised truth, not silence. Victor sent no congratulations. I heard he sold his apartment. I heard he was alone. I felt no joy in that, only closure. Consequences had found their address. Sometimes, when trains pass nearby, I still pause. I breathe. I remember the edge and the choice to step back. Then I look at my children, safe, laughing, real. The story people tell online has faded. The truth remains, lived daily. I learned that justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it builds a life so solid that the past can no longer reach you. And that is the ending I chose, one where survival turned into dignity, fear into clarity, and loss into a future no one could ever push away again. Life did not slow after the verdict. It reorganized. Mornings began with bottles warming and school runs, evenings with paperwork and quiet planning. I learned that healing is administrative before it is emotional. Forms replace fear, schedules replace chaos. Each completed task felt like reclaiming ground. Daniel encouraged distance from the case, but updates arrived anyway. Victor's appeal failed. The court cited risk, intent, and documented manipulation. Support payments posted on time, enforced by oversight he could not evade. Power looks small when it must report monthly. Celeste resurfaced briefly, issuing statements through counsel, apologizing without naming harm. It fooled no one. Her license review advanced, and clients vanished. Accountability travels sideways first, then forward. Ethan moved closer, a few blocks away, so help was ordinary. He taught Lucas to listen for trains and identify safe platforms, turning fear into knowledge. Grace smiled at the sounds that once froze me. Exposure became mastery. I returned to work part-time, careful and steady. Numbers made sense when stories did not. Saving grew automatic. Independence became routine. The apartment brightened with plants and fingerprints. Stability stopped feeling fragile. A letter arrived from the transit authority, formal and plain. They thanked me for cooperation and confirmed policy changes. Extra cameras, clearer lines, training, updates. My name was not public, but impact was real. Prevention is a quiet victory. Daniel proposed without spectacle, asking in the kitchen while soup simmered. The children clapped like it was a game. I said yes because safety had become consistent, not because pain had vanished. We planned a modest wedding and a larger future. Counseling continued. Boundaries hardened. The past loosened its grip. One evening, Victor requested mediation to discuss logistics. I declined. The court had spoken. Silence was not avoidance. It was completion. When I think of the platform now, I remember the stop more than the shove. I remember the command that cut through noise, the system choosing life. I remember choosing myself. The story did not end with punishment alone. It ended with repair. With laws tightened, with children protected, with love built deliberately. That is the version worth telling, and it keeps unfolding. Neighbors noticed the change before I did. I stood straighter. I said no without apology. Invitations felt optional. Peace became selective. I learned to leave rooms early and conversations unfinished. Safety loves exits. We created rituals, Sunday walks, library cards, notes on the fridge, small promises kept. When anxiety surfaced, I named it, then moved. Motion quieted it. Daniel and I built finances transparently, budgets shared, goals written, trust measured by consistency. Love felt practical and warm. Ethan told stories of our mother, not excuses. We mourned honestly. Healing included grief. A final report closed the case. Recommendations adopted. Files archived. I boxed my notes and labeled them simply, truth. Sometimes strangers recognize me. They nod, I nod back. We share nothing else. If anyone asks what saved us, I say evidence, patience, and people who showed up. The rest is noise. Looking ahead, I choose growth over revenge. Our home holds laughter, not secrets. Consequences taught restraint, compassion taught courage. I teach my children names for feelings and routes to safety. We plan trips, birthdays, futures. I forgive myself most of all. The platform is behind us, yet vigilance remains. Justice worked because we worked with it. That lesson endures, steady and usable, guiding choices long after headlines fade and ordinary life, earned slowly, continues. This ending honors truth, family, accountability, and love. Proving survival can transform into lasting dignity without spectacle for generations ahead. Forever, always. Together, time tested what justice promised. Months turned into a year, and quiet became the measure of truth. Our lives no longer revolved around court dates, but consequences still echoed in subtle ways. Victor's sentencing arrived without drama, a brief notice buried in local news. Probation, restitution, professional bans. Nothing cinematic, everything permanent. I attended none of it. Closure did not require proximity. Instead, I spent that morning packing lunches and braiding hair, teaching Lucas how to tie his shoes, while Grace laughed on the floor. Healing looked like repetition done safely. Daniel's work continued, but he learned to come home fully. We cooked together, argued gently, apologized quickly. Love, I discovered, was reliability under stress. We chose counseling even when things felt good, because prevention mattered more than pride. Ethan accepted a leadership role, overseeing safety audits. He never spoke about heroism. He spoke about margins, redundancies, and people. His work saved strangers who would never know our names. That anonymity felt right. One afternoon, a woman approached me at the park. She said she remembered the platform. She thanked me for speaking when it was easier to disappear. I thanked her for stopping. Courage multiplies quietly. The children grew. Grace took her first steps near the window where trains passed. Lucas learned numbers by counting cars. Fear had transformed into familiarity, then into trust built on rules and awareness. We moved to a brighter apartment. Plants thrived, sunlight stayed longer, stability became visible. We hosted dinners. Laughter filled corners, once guarded by silence. Sometimes, at night, I revisited old notes, not to relive pain, but to remember process. Evidence mattered, patience mattered, asking for help mattered. I archived the files again, then locked them away. When anniversaries came, we marked them gently. A walk. A shared meal. Gratitude spoken aloud. Trauma softened when acknowledged without judgment. The past never vanished. It integrated. It informed choices without dictating them. I trusted my instincts again, not as alarms, but as guides. Our wedding anniversary passed quietly. Daniel left a note on the counter, thanking me for choosing truth. I thanked him for choosing steadiness. Ethan told Lucas the story of stopping a train, not as a warning, but as a lesson in responsibility. Lucas listened seriously, then asked for ice cream. Life balanced itself. I understood then that justice is not a moment, it is maintenance. It requires care, attention, and humility. It grows when communities learn and systems adjust. If this story reaches others, I hope they hear this part. Survival is the beginning, not the victory. Building something better is the work that follows. I am no longer defined by what was done to me. I am defined by what I protected, what I built, and who I became afterward. That is the ending that lasts. It continues forward, steady and ordinary, shaped by choices repeated daily. I volunteer now, quietly, helping others navigate systems that once terrified me. I teach documentation, patience, and self-trust. When fear appears, I name it, then proceed anyway. This life is not perfect, but it is honest. Safety is built, not granted. Love is chosen, not demanded. My children grow inside that truth. And that is enough. We move on without spectacle, carrying lessons forward. Justice did not give us everything, but it gave us room. In that space, we built peace, memory, and belonging. The past stays behind us, organized and contained. The future stays open, earned one careful step at a time. This ending honors endurance, accountability, love, family, truth, patience, and life, rebuilt with intention, always forward. Years later, the city changed again, and so did we. Construction cranes traced new lines across the skyline, and routines adjusted around growth. I learned that peace invites ambition back into the room. I enrolled in evening classes, accounting turning into management, curiosity into confidence. Progress felt earned, not rushed. Daniel supported quietly, cooking dinners on nights I studied, reading drafts, asking questions that sharpened thinking. Partnership meant shared momentum. Ethan visited on Sundays, bringing stories and fruit, reminding us where we came from without trapping us there. One afternoon, a letter arrived from the Transit Authority requesting testimony for a training program. They wanted a survivor's perspective paired with operations data. I hesitated, then agreed. Visibility, when chosen, can protect others. Standing before a room of engineers and supervisors, I spoke plainly. I described the platform without drama, the edits without anger, the process without blame. I explained how systems fail when convenience overrides care, and how documentation restores balance. Heads nodded, notes filled pages. Afterward, a young supervisor thanked me. He said the training changed how he watched crowds. Prevention had a face now. I walked out lighter. The children thrived. Lucas discovered drawing. Grace loved music. Their world felt expansive and safe. We planned a small trip, watched waves, collected shells. Ordinary joy accumulated like interest. Victor's name surfaced rarely. When it did, it held no charge. Accountability had settled. The lesson remained without the wound. At home, Daniel and I faced ordinary conflicts. Money choices, time limits. We practiced repair. Apologies came quickly. Trust deepened through repetition. Ethan received a commendation for safety reforms. He accepted it briefly, redirecting credit to teams. Integrity prefers plural. I kept volunteering, helping others prepare records, navigate hearings, find steadiness. Stories varied, patterns repeated. Power yields to patience more often than force. On an anniversary evening, we returned to the river. Trains passed. I felt no pull toward the edge. I felt gratitude for distance earned. Daniel asked what I wanted next. I said purpose with rest. He smiled, understanding balance as achievement. The future did not promise ease. It promised tools. That was enough. I wrote this chapter for those who doubt quiet endings. Justice can be loud, but repair is steady. Love is practical. Safety is teachable. Truth persists. When night fell, the city lights mirrored stars. We walked home together, steps aligned, carrying groceries and plans. The past stayed filed. The present breathed. The future waited, open and workable, shaped by choices we were ready to make together. Every day, without fear, without spectacle, and with care. We learned to mark progress, not perfection. Calendars filled with school dates, medical checkups, and shared goals. Mistakes happened, were named, then fixed. Courage became ordinary. Boundaries held. Gratitude stayed specific. We honored helpers, paid kindness forward, and kept records, because memory fades. When doubt surfaced, we reviewed facts. When anger rose, we paused. When joy appeared, we let it linger. The city kept changing, but our footing held. I understood success as safety sustained over time. That understanding grounded ambition and softened urgency. If another storm comes, we know procedures, allies, and exits. We know how to document, how to speak, how to wait. Most of all, we know how to choose each other. That knowledge ends this chapter not with certainty, but with capability, a durable gift earned through patience, truth, and care. It carries forward into tomorrow, practical, resilient, humane, ready for work, love, and rest, proving survival can mature into wisdom without bitterness, spectacle, or fear. Shared, grounded, accountable, hopeful, steady, patient, truthful, together. The invitation arrived without ceremony. A plain envelope slipped under our door, stamped with an institutional seal. A national safety conference wanted a closing address, a case study on prevention. I hesitated, then accepted, knowing visibility now served protection, not exposure. The hall was large, the audience mixed, professionals and families. I spoke after data and diagrams, after charts proving what patients can change. I told the story forward, not backward, focusing on decisions, safeguards, and accountability. I named no villains. I named outcomes. During questions, a man stood. He introduced himself as Victor's former partner, voice steady, eyes tired. He said he had ignored warnings, trusted image over evidence, and lived with that choice. He thanked me for forcing daylight. The room held silence long enough to feel honest. Afterward, reporters waited. I answered 3 questions and left. Boundaries protect impact. At home, Daniel cooked, the children colored, Ethan called to say congratulations mattered less than rest. We slept early. Weeks later, a nonprofit offered a board seat. I declined, recommending others. Influence is stewardship, not accumulation. I kept volunteering locally, where outcomes stayed tangible. Spring arrived. We planted tomatoes. Grace learned to ride a bike. Lucas asked about right and wrong. I said, right means choosing care when shortcuts tempt you. He nodded, satisfied. A letter came from the Transit Authority announcing annual audits and scholarships in safety engineering. The program carried a neutral name. I smiled at the quiet permanence. Daniel and I planned a second honeymoon, modest and unposted. We promised phones down. Love deepens in absence of applause. On the anniversary of the platform, we returned briefly, daylight softening edges. Trains passed. I breathed. We left flowers for no one, then walked away. That night, I wrote a final note in my archive. Not evidence, but gratitude. I thanked systems that learned, people who showed up, and the version of myself who waited. Stories end when attention moves on. Lives continue when values stay. I chose continuation. If asked what the twist was, I would say this. Power lost because truth persisted, not because anyone shouted louder. The ending was not victory over someone, but alignment with something stronger. We live with that alignment now. Work is steady, love is ordinary, safety is maintained. When fear visits, it is brief and named. The future remains open, workable, ours. That is enough. I keep teaching documentation, timelines, and calm speech because systems listen best to clarity. Daniel supports without spotlight, Ethan mentors quietly, and the children grow curious and brave. We celebrate small wins, repair quickly, and rest deliberately. The city keeps moving, but our footing holds. If another crisis comes, we know procedures, allies, and exits. We know how to wait and when to speak. The lesson endures. Truth plus patience changes structures. This story closes here, but the work continues tomorrow. Grounded, humane, and ready. It honors those harmed and those who acted, assigns responsibility, and protects the future. Nothing is erased, everything is learned from. I carry forward with gratitude, accountability, and care. The ending is not loud, but it is firm. It stands. We choose continuity over spectacle, maintenance over outrage, and kindness over fear. These choices compound. They build homes, systems, and trust. They keep children safe and adults honest. They last. That is the promise we keep, daily, together, without turning back, moving forward with care. Enough to end here, strong, complete, and ready for what comes. Thank you for witnessing a life rebuilt through patience and truth. Always forward, grounded, accountable, loving, resilient, and free. At last, the last twist came when no one expected another. It arrived quietly, wrapped in routine, disguised as closure. A certified letter appeared one morning, addressed to me alone. Inside was a request for a private restorative review, an option rarely offered, tied to Victor's final sentencing phase. The court wanted a statement, not for appeal, but for record. Not pain, but impact. Daniel told me it was optional. Ethan said the system sometimes needed human language to finish learning. I spent a night awake, weighing silence against contribution. By dawn, I chose to speak. The room was small. No press, no audience. Victor sat across the table, thinner, older, stripped of posture. He did not look at me. For the first time, he had no leverage, no narrative shield. I spoke without notes. I described the platform as a place of trust. I explained how calculated risk becomes violence when power erases consent. I talked about children growing with fear that did not belong to them. I did not accuse. I documented. Victor finally looked up. His voice shook when he spoke. He admitted he believed consequences were theoretical, that money delayed reality. He said he never expected the system to remember. That admission entered the record. Weeks later, the sentence adjusted. Not longer, but deeper. Mandatory ethics testimony. Lifetime prohibition from transit-related ventures. Restitution redirected to safety education funds. The system responded to clarity. I felt no triumph. I felt alignment. Life continued. The children started new schools. Daniel accepted a role teaching compliance ethics. Ethan published a paper on platform design. The ripple spread. One evening, we celebrated quietly at home. Cake, laughter, ordinary noise. I watched my children and understood reward differently. Not riches, not applause, safety, respect, choice. Victor faded fully after that. His name became a footnote in policy manuals. His legacy transformed into caution. The final gift came months later. A letter from a woman I had never met, thanking me for preventing a similar incident at her station. Her son stood safely beside her. That was the ending. If stories require spectacle, this one refuses. It ends with systems changed, people protected, and a family grounded. Justice arrived not as punishment alone, but as prevention. I closed the archive for the last time and labeled it complete. Some wounds become maps, some endings become foundations. This was both. We move forward with care, evidence, and love, knowing truth does not rush, but it does endure. I carried that lesson into daily choices, teaching my children boundaries, courage, and patience. We practiced asking questions, waiting for answers, and trusting processes designed to protect. When mistakes happened, we repaired them openly, without shame. This became our inheritance, stronger than money, louder than reputation. Friends asked if I ever missed the fire of the fight. I said no. Peace felt earned, not empty. The work ahead remained meaningful, rooted in service rather than survival. Each morning, sunlight crossed the kitchen floor, and I remembered how close we came to losing everything. Gratitude followed naturally, not forced. It shaped my voice, my pace, my trust. This story closes now, not because nothing else will happen, but because fear no longer leads. We choose care, truth, and responsibility, again and again. That choice compounds, protecting lives we may never meet. In that knowledge, I rest, certain that what we built will hold, not perfectly, but honestly. The future remains open, and we are ready to meet it, together, steady, aware, and unafraid. At last, always, forward, grounded, free, complete, enduring, human, true. Enough. Forever. Onward. The year that followed was quieter, but not empty. Quiet does not mean nothing happens. It means events no longer arrive screaming. They arrive scheduled, expected, manageable. I learned to respect that kind of peace. Daniel's ethics course filled quickly. Students came with notebooks and skepticism, left with questions they hadn't planned to ask. He never mentioned Victor. He taught systems, incentives, and responsibility. Accountability without spectacle. Ethan's work expanded beyond audits. He consulted on national safety guidelines, translating lived experience into policy language. He told me once that truth becomes durable when it learns how to write itself into rules. The children adapted easily. Lucas made friends. Grace learned new words daily. Their memories did not include fear as a default. That felt like success. I continued volunteering, fewer hours now, more focused. I trained others to document events, preserve messages, and speak clearly under pressure. Watching confidence grow in people who once shook reminded me why patience matters. One afternoon, I received an invitation to contribute to a policy handbook. Not a story, not testimony, just recommendations. I accepted. Influence, when used sparingly, travels farther. Life brought small challenges. A job change. A health scare that resolved. A disagreement that required repair. None of it felt overwhelming. Tools worked when practiced. Daniel and I celebrated our anniversary at home. No photos, just food, music, and conversation that wandered. Love felt practical and alive. Occasionally, someone recognized me. They asked how it felt to win. I corrected them gently. "It feels like maintenance," I said, "like keeping something safe." The city kept building, platforms upgraded, signs clearer, cameras visible. Ordinary improvements multiplied. I visited the station once alone, midday, when crowds thinned. I stood far from the edge, breathing evenly. The memory no longer commanded my body, it informed it. I left without ceremony. At home, I archived the final correspondence, emails, notices, confirmations. I labeled the folder lessons, not evidence. I realized then that the story's power was never the fall, it was the response. Systems can learn, people can change, harm can be reduced. We taught the children that rules exist to protect, not control, that questions are allowed, that help is strength. Daniel accepted a promotion that kept his values intact. Ethan declined one that did not. Choices aligned. I wrote less, lived more. The past softened into context. If another crisis arises, we are ready. Not hardened, prepared. That is the ending that lasts. It does not demand attention. It sustains life. Every night, I lock the door, check once, and rest. Every morning, I open the curtains and plan the day. Ordinary acts, earned. This chapter closes with continuity, not climax. With systems improved, children safe, relationships honest, the lesson remains simple and difficult. Truth plus patience changes outcomes. Care plus structure protects lives. I carry that forward without urgency, without fear. The future is not guaranteed, it is built. Word by word, choice by choice, day by day. Together. Years after the noise faded, a different challenge arrived, one that could not be solved with documents or hearings. Lucas came home from school, quiet, backpack heavier than usual. He waited until dinner ended before asking why some kids said his family was that train story. The question landed softly and hard at the same time. I took a breath, reminding myself this moment mattered as much as any courtroom. I told him the truth in pieces he could carry. I said something bad happened, people made wrong choices, and we worked to fix what we could. I told him being known was not the same as being defined. He nodded, unsatisfied but listening. Grace climbed into my lap, sensing weight without words. Daniel watched from the sink, steady. That night, I realized healing had shifted generations. The work was no longer protection from danger, but guidance through memory. Systems had learned, adults had changed, children needed language. At school, I met with a counselor and teacher. We agreed on boundaries, facts, and kindness. Rumors lose power when adults refuse to amplify them. By Friday, the whispers faded. Ethan visited that weekend, bringing model trains for the kids. He explained how tracks guide motion safely when respected. Lucas listened closely, then asked questions about signals and stops. Fear turned into curiosity again. Life pressed forward. I accepted a leadership role at work, managing people with transparency I once craved. Authority felt different now, grounded in listening rather than control. Daniel and I adjusted schedules, choosing presence over pace. We said no more often. Rest became a decision, not a reward. One evening, a community meeting requested my input on safety planning. I spoke briefly, emphasizing care, data, and humility. The room responded with action, not applause. I understood then that influence had matured. It no longer required my story, only my principles. The children grew taller. Homework replaced bedtime stories. Laughter filled new spaces. The past stayed accessible but inactive. Sometimes, late at night, I revisited the platform in my mind, not with fear, but with gratitude for the stop, the pause, the chance to choose again. That pause had multiplied into years. I taught Lucas and Grace how to ask for help, how to document problems, how to wait for answers. These were practical gifts. The world remained imperfect. News cycles proved that. But our home stayed steady. This chapter closes on continuity, not surprise. The biggest twist was time itself, turning crisis into curriculum, fear into fluency. We did not escape the story. We learned to live with it honestly, lightly, without letting it lead. That is how healing looks when it lasts. Looking ahead, I accept uncertainty without urgency. We plan, revise, and adapt. I teach boundaries as skills, not walls. Daniel teaches patience by example. Ethan teaches responsibility through systems. The children learn courage through questions. We practice noticing, recording, and responding. When mistakes happen, we repair them. When fear visits, we name it. When help appears, we accept it. This story earns its ending because it stays useful. It does not promise safety without effort. It promises tools. That promise is honest, it respects limits, and insists on care. We move forward, grounded, aware, and capable, carrying lessons that protect others quietly. That is the inheritance we keep, and it is enough. Nothing here seeks applause or pity, only continuity, accountability, and calm. Those values endure beyond headlines, beyond trials, beyond anger, shaping ordinary days into something steady, humane, and quietly brave for everyone involved. This ending stands firm, complete, earned, and moving. The invitation to close the chapter came from an unexpected place. A community center near the station asked me to attend a reopening ceremony after renovations funded by the safety program. It was not mandatory, not publicized, simply an offer. I hesitated, then accepted, understanding that endings sometimes require presence. The building smelled of fresh paint and coffee. Children ran through hallways once dim, now bright. I recognized the platform through the windows beyond, distant but visible. The edge no longer called to me. It existed, managed, respected. I spoke briefly. I thanked workers, planners, and neighbors who believed prevention was worth investment. I avoided personal history. The applause felt polite, then faded. That was fine. Afterward, a woman approached holding a toddler. She said her husband worked nights and worried about crowds. She said changes mattered. I listened. Listening felt like completion. Daniel waited outside with the kids. Grace tugged my hand toward the playground. Lucas pointed out new signs and lines. We stayed longer than planned. That evening, at home, we cooked together. Ordinary noise filled the rooms. I realized nothing inside me was bracing. That absence was the victory. Later, I opened the old notebook one last time. Not to read, but to acknowledge it. I closed it and placed it on the shelf beside cookbooks and school folders. The archive had become part of the house, not the center. Ethan called to say a new cohort graduated from safety training. He sounded tired and proud. Systems change through people who stay. Weeks passed. Spring leaned toward summer. We planned a modest trip, booked early trains, chose seats with windows. The ride felt simple. I watched the landscape move without tension. On the return, Lucas asked why I smiled. I told him I was happy, things worked. He accepted that. Life continued. Challenges arrived, smaller now. We handled them. The past stayed quiet. I understood that closure was not forgetting. It was remembering without pain. This chapter ends with an image that stays. My children walking ahead, Daniel beside me, a station functioning as it should. No drama, no danger, just movement. That is the ending I trust. I step forward knowing the story did its work. It taught patience, evidence, and care. It protected lives beyond our own. It changed structures quietly. If asked what came after survival, I answer stability, then growth, then rest. In that order, we keep going. I did not expect joy to feel so ordinary. It arrived without announcement, settled into routines, and stayed. Mornings were busy, evenings calm. We argued, apologized, laughed, and planned. The balance held. When friends asked if I feared the past returning, I answered honestly. I respected it, but I did not obey it. Preparedness replaced vigilance. Knowledge replaced dread. I taught workshops quarterly, not telling my story, only methods. People learned quickly when fear was removed from instruction. That felt right. Daniel and I saved steadily. We spoke openly about money and time. Transparency prevented resentment. Trust deepened. Ethan visited less often, busy building safer systems. When he came, the kids ran to him. Family endured. On quiet nights, I listened to distant trains and felt nothing but distance. Sound had lost its power. This was the final lesson. Survival is loud. Stability is quiet. Growth is patient. Love is practical. I closed this chapter knowing the story no longer needed me to carry it. It belonged to systems improved and people protected. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but not the old fear. That was enough. We moved forward together, grounded, steady, unafraid, complete, always. The past returned one final time, not as a threat but as confirmation. A court notice arrived informing me that Victor's sentence had officially concluded and all related cases were closed. No appeal. No pending motions. The system had finished speaking. I read the letter once, then set it down. My hands did not shake, my chest did not tighten. The absence of reaction surprised me more than the news itself. Closure, I learned, feels like neutrality. Daniel asked how I felt. I said complete. He nodded, understanding that completeness does not need celebration. That evening, Ethan came by with takeout and news of his own. A National Transportation Board had adopted several recommendations born from the case, embedding them into federal guidelines. The language was dry. The impact was not. Safety margins widened. Oversight sharpened. Prevention scaled. Lucas listened, then asked if that meant fewer accidents. Ethan said yes. Lucas smiled, satisfied with results. Grace climbed onto my lap and asked if trains were good or bad. I told her they were tools. Tools reflect the care of those who build and use them. She accepted that and asked for dessert. Later, after the children slept, I stepped onto the balcony alone. City lights stretched endlessly. Somewhere below, trains moved along tracks, now watched more carefully. I thought of the version of myself who stood at the edge, afraid and unheard. I honored her quietly. The ending everyone expects is punishment. The ending that matters is repair. Victor lost what he valued most, not freedom alone, but relevance. His influence dissolved into policy footnotes and compliance seminars. His story became a warning taught without his name. That was justice appropriate to the harm. Celeste never returned to public life. Her skills found no market. Reputation laundering fails when systems demand records. That consequence lingered. As for me, I gained what could not be taken. Agency, family, trust earned slowly and kept carefully. I did not become famous. I became secure. We marked the day with an ordinary dinner. Pasta, bread, laughter, no speeches, no toasts. Ordinary joy tasted better than victory ever could. In the weeks that followed, opportunities came. Consulting offers. Speaking invitations. I declined most. I chose depth over breadth, rest over reach. The children thrived in their rhythms. Lucas learned to swim, Grace learned to read. Their milestones carried no shadows. I understood then that success was not avoiding hardship, but absorbing it without losing direction. If someone asks what the final twist was, I say this. The system worked because people stayed. They documented, waited, and refused shortcuts. Power fell not from force, but from patience. That lesson reshaped how I live. I invest in processes, not personalities. I choose consistency over charisma. I trust records more than reassurances. The story ends here because nothing remains unresolved. Harm was acknowledged, responsibility assigned, prevention enacted, healing continued. I keep a small reminder on my desk, a simple note that reads, "Evidence plus time equals truth." It guides decisions large and small. Tomorrow will bring new challenges. They always do. But the tools remain. The support remains. The fear does not lead. I am no longer the woman at the edge. I am the woman who stepped back, then forward, building something that holds. That is the ending that satisfies. Not spectacle, not revenge, completion. We live inside that completion now, steady and ordinary, carrying lessons forward without weight. The story rests. Life continues. And that is enough. The final chapter does not arrive with noise. It arrives on a Sunday morning, sunlight spilling across the kitchen table, cereal bowls clinking, children arguing about nothing important. Daniel pours coffee. Ethan laughs at a joke that makes no sense. I watch and understand. This is the reward. We live in a house filled with ordinary proof. School calendars, grocery lists, shoes by the door. Nothing here can be bought back by power or taken by threat. It exists because we chose patience every day after fear tried to hurry us. Lucas asks if trains are still safe. I tell him they are safer because people cared enough to fix what was broken. Grace announces she wants to be an engineer. We all nod like this was inevitable. Later, we walk to the park. The city hums, life moves. I feel no pull toward the past, only gratitude for distance earned honestly. Pain did not disappear. It transformed into understanding, and understanding became protection. Daniel takes my hand. Marriage did not rescue me. It met me where I stood. Love grew from respect, not debt. That matters. Ethan kneels to tie Grace's shoe. He is no longer the man who pulled an emergency stop in silence. He is an uncle, a guardian, a builder of systems that save strangers he will never meet. That is justice in motion. I think of Victor once, briefly. His world shrank to consequences equal to his choices, not cruelty, balance. The universe did not favor me. It responded to truth. If this story offers anything, let it be this. Survival is not the ending. Safety is not luck. Justice is not loud. They are built, documented, defended, and maintained by people who refuse shortcuts. We return home before sunset. Dinner cooks, homework spreads across the table. Tomorrow will bring work, schedules, and small problems worth solving. Fear is no longer invited. I tuck the children into bed and listen to their breathing, steady and unafraid. I close the door softly and stand in the hallway, realizing the long fight is over. This is the happy ending people ask for. Not riches, not revenge. A life where children grow without shadows, where love is chosen freely, and where the past stays in its place. I turn off the lights and rest, knowing everything I lost was replaced with something stronger. Dignity, family, peace. That is enough. That is everything. Tomorrow we will wake early, pack lunches, miss the bus, laugh, adjust, and keep moving. The future will not be perfect, but it will be ours, built with habits that protect rather than impress. I will teach my children to question power, respect evidence, and choose kindness without surrender. They will learn that love is action repeated, not promises spoken once. When they stumble, we will help them stand, not shame them for falling. When they succeed, we will remind them to share credit. This is how cycles break. If anyone remembers my name, let it be for calm persistence, not tragedy. If no one remembers, that is fine too. Impact does not require recognition. It requires follow-through. We end here because the lesson has landed. Life after harm is not about proving strength. It is about practicing care until it becomes natural. That practice saved us. It will save others. The story closes, but the work continues quietly, faithfully, every single day. We accept uncertainty, trust preparation, value community, and choose hope daily, understanding that endings matter less than the steady commitments that shape ordinary lives together, patiently, responsibly, with care always. So, the story has come to an end. And if you're still here with us right now, truly still here, then something in this journey must have touched your heart in a quiet way. Stories like this aren't really about trains, courts, or revenge. They're about what happens when life pushes us to the edge and how we choose to step back, breathe, and keep going. There's a line from Marcus Aurelius that says, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Healing doesn't come from controlling everything around us. It comes from learning what we can carry, what we must release, and what we patiently rebuild day by day. Another Stoic reminder tells us, the obstacle is the way. Pain doesn't have to destroy us. Sometimes it becomes the very path that leads us to clarity, dignity, and peace. If this story reminded you to be gentler with yourself, more patient with others, or braver in facing your own challenges, then it has already done its work. And if it spoke to you even just a little, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who might need it, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us keep telling stories that heal, connect, and remind us all that quiet strength still matters.